Free Thoughts, Military Camp, June 24th, 1917. My dear mother and sister, this is the best stuff I can find to write what may be my last letter. I am now confined in a pit 10 feet deep, which started at the surface at 3 feet by 2 and tapers off to 2 feet 6 inches by 15. The bottom is full of water, and I have to stand on 2 strips of wood all day long, just above the water line. There's no room to walk about, and sitting is impossible. The sun beats down, and through the long day, there are only the walls of clay to look at. I wish I could see your letters. I could be reassured or know your wishes. As it is, I feel sentenced to death, knowing that within a few days I could be sent to France and shot.
His name was James Brightmore. He was a solicitor's clerk from Manchester, but he was also a conscientious objector.
You've already served 8 months in prison for disobeying orders, and as you show no sign of ceasing your pointless protest, I'm now going to sentence you to solitary confinement. Yes, Corporal. What do you mean there's no cell available? Well, then find somewhere else. Dig a pit, if necessary.
It was after Brightmore had spent a week in the pit that a sympathetic soldier, at great risk to himself, dropped down a pencil stub and a cigarette packet on which Brightmore wrote his letter home. Thanks so much for watching this. My name's Michael Mears. My grandfather, William Mears, fought in the First World War. My dad, Ron Mears, fought in the Second World War. My best friend at school, Scott Dodkins, went on to Sandhurst to have a successful career in the army as an officer. And it was Scott who mocked me mercilessly about my pencil case, on which, at the age of 15, I'd written in white ink, "War is illogical!" I don't know where my pacifist gene came from, if there is such a thing as a pacifist gene. But what I do know is that my pacifism has never been tested. Not truly tested. Not in the way that James Brightmore's was tested. Or Bert Brocklesby's. When war was declared in 1914, 3 years before Brightmore's pit was dug, the British Army was completely dependent on volunteers.
Ha! Look at them all, queuing up round the square and halfway down the Sheffield Road. There are my brothers. Harold! Phil! How can I not be part of this?
Bert Brocklesby was a 25-year-old schoolteacher living in the South Yorkshire town of Conisborough. He was also choir master and lay preacher at his local Methodist chapel.
But what about the 6th commandment? What about my belief that the Lord's called me to work for his kingdom, not to go about destroying his children? If I believe, as I do, that God controls everything, then surely he can control the spin of a coin tossed in the air. So I'll ask him. I'll ask him for a plain yes or no. Should I volunteer? Heads will signify that God wishes me to keep my head, not to volunteer. Heads. I can't make up my mind just on one toss, though. Tails. Right. This is the decider. Heads. 2 to 1 though. I don't find that very convincing.
Heads. 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 Heads.
6 to 1. That's pretty persuasive. But the Lord had 12 disciples. What if I toss 12 times in all, once for each of them? I realise this is not a method a maturer judgment would recommend.
Heads. 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 Heads.
11 to 1. That one was Judas, I imagine. Well, this only confirms what I know in my heart. I just pray the army doesn't run out of volunteers.
The year is 1902 when the National Service League is founded. Pushing for a program of military conscription, its first president is the Duke of Wellington, and early supporters include Rudyard Kipling. The church, too, is well represented. The Bishop of Chester is one of its founder members, and in one of the League's leaflets, Canon H.J. Scrine declared,
War is not murder, as some fancy. The fighting and killing are not the essence of it, but are the accidents, though the inseparable accidents, and even these are mainly purged of savagery and transfigured into devotion. War is not murder, but sacrifice, which is the soul of Christianity.
But even with the support of Lord Northcliffe's Daily Mail, there are plenty of voices speaking out against conscription.
The most valuable thing for an army is not quantity, but quality.
Moreover, if Britain introduces conscription, it will alarm our neighbours and could well accelerate the arms race.
Besides which, Britain's defences are already safeguarded by its enormous, growing and costly navy.
But most importantly, as the Under-Secretary for War declares in the House of Commons, compulsion is foreign to the British nation, to the British character, and to the genius of our people. By August 1914, the mood in the country is predominantly against conscription, although one of Britain's most eminent mathematicians and philosophers fears that that mood cannot last much longer.
The evening before war is declared, I find myself walking the streets of London, noticing the cheering crowds, making myself sensitive to the emotions of passers-by. I have always imagined, what most pacifists contend, that wars are forced upon a reluctant population by despotic and Machiavellian governments. But during this and the following days, I discover to my amazement that the average man and woman is delighted at the prospect of war, revels in the anticipation of carnage. I need to revise my views on human nature. Bertrand Russell was 42, so if conscription was brought in, it's unlikely he'd be called up. But younger pacifists, like Fenner Brockway, believe some kind of preemptive action has to be taken, which leads to my founding an organisation against conscription called the No Conscription Fellowship, or the NCF, including in its ranks Quakers, socialists, industrial workers of the world, anarchists, atheists, and many other political and religious objectors. Our chairman is the socialist agnostic Clifford Allen, and on our national committee, Bertrand Russell. If I'd been a young man in 1914, would I have joined the No Conscription Fellowship? Absolutely! One of the religious objectors who joins the No Conscription Fellowship is Bert Brocklesby. And one Sunday evening in 1915, he preaches a sermon in chapel, which he knows is a little bit controversial. Yesterday, I came across some words by Dr. Alfred Salter,
the Quaker pacifist. Words which struck me forcibly and which I'd like to share with you. He says that if our religion is the Christian religion, and we want to know what we should do under any given circumstances, we must ask ourselves, what would Christ do in our place? In the matter of this war, would Christ answer the Prime Minister's call, make himself proficient in arms, dress up in uniform and hurry to the continent to beat the Germans off? Christ in khaki, out in France, thrusting his bayonet into the body of a German workman. Can we picture that? Of course.
Shameful. This
Of
is
course.
shameful.
We can't picture that. That picture is an impossible one, and we all know it. And Dr. Salter goes on to say that that settles the matter for him. He cannot uphold the war, even on its supposedly defensive side, and he cannot therefore advise anyone else to take part in what he believes to be wrong and wicked
This
for
is
himself.
shameful.
But
Do we have to listen to this?
please, may I finish?
Go on.
Thank you. But he then asks, what will be the consequences of such a policy for himself? If he refuses to fight or support measures of defence, it's possible he may be shot by the authorities as guilty of treason. Very well, he says. Rather than kill a German lad with whom he has no conceivable quarrel, he is prepared to be shot himself. Prepared to be shot himself.
You had no business preaching that sermon tonight. It's not Methodist doctrine.
He only preached it because he's too frightened to go himself. Why don't you take this, Mr. Brocklesby, and wear it in your lapel?
Listen here, young man. Why haven't you joined up yet? The commandments? Oh, bugger the commandments.
But, Annie, hello, my love.
You were very brave to say those things in your sermon, Bert. Who gave you that white feather? You're not a coward. You're standing up for what you believe in, Bert. That's brave.
Did you say brave, Miss Wainwright? My son was injured at the Battle of Neuve-Chapelle. Could have died. And he has the gall to get up in a pulpit and preach that it's wrong and wicked. Makes me sick to my stomach. And don't you have a brother, Gilbert, serving in France as we speak, Miss Wainwright?
I do, yes.
Well then, don't know how you can be engaged to such a man.
Bert,
Father,
you don't make things easy for me, do you, son?
preaching sermons like that. Hello, Annie, love. Now look, I know you've said you won't consider the Army Medical Corps, but what about the Quakers? The Quakers are requesting volunteers for their Friends Ambulance Unit, and they're not attached to the Army in any way. That would surely suit you.
It troubles me, Father.
What does? Helping the wounded? Surely that's a worthy task to undertake.
It's not that straightforward. The problem is what they do once they're recovered. If the unit I'm with is simply helping the injured get strong again so they can return to the front to resume their killing, then...
But it's run by the Quakers,
I know.
Bert. The Quakers.
I know it's run by the Quakers, Father. You've made that point, but I'm sorry.
I don't think I can.